Hello guys, welcome to JavaScript Programming for Programmers. So in this course, we are going to learn JavaScript programming. If you already know JavaScript, this may be a good refresher course to polish up your skills. I will be covering some decent stuff in a relatively short amount of time. So in this video, I will be covering concepts like variables, data types, objects, prototypes, and constructor functions. So the focus is on learning essential concepts to understand the language. So what is JavaScript? It is a programming language which is used to make web pages interactive and dynamic. Alongside HTML and CSS, JavaScript is one of the core technologies of web development. It is essential part of web applications for client-side page behaviors. In fact, it is the only standardized language which runs in the web browser. Therefore, it is a mandatory skill required for web development. Other languages like PHP and ASP.NET can only run on server side, whereas JavaScript is used on the client side. Every web browser has a built-in JavaScript engine. It is an interpreted scripting language. It means there is no need to compile the source code. It just runs the source code, which makes things much easier. We can write source code in the HTML files. It simply runs from there when the HTML file is loaded in the web browser. JavaScript is a prototype-based object-oriented programming language. It means you don't have to create classes and instantiate objects from it. You simply create objects and add properties or methods to it, or simply extend the existing objects. This is called prototype-based object-oriented programming. We will get into this topic later in detail. JavaScript data types are dynamic, and type verification and type safety is checked at runtime. So there is no type safety. Therefore, it can be difficult to maintain. JavaScript is multi-paradigm programming language. It offers event-driven, functional, and imperative programming styles. One thing you need to remember is that JavaScript is not related to Java in any way. So the name JavaScript is somewhat misleading. These are completely different things. Though there are some syntax similarities between the two, but both have different purposes. JavaScript is a lightweight scripting language, whereas Java is a static high-level programming language. JavaScript works with texts, dates, regular expressions, data structures, and the document object model. However, the language itself does not include any input-output statements such as networking, storage, or graphic facilities. The host environment, usually a web browser, provides those APIs. Originally used only in web browsers, but nowadays JavaScript engines are being embedded in the server-side deployments and non-browser applications. And you can develop mobile applications, games, and desktop applications. What is ECMAScript? JavaScript became ECMA standard in 1997. It is known as ECMAScript or more specifically ECMA 262. You can say JavaScript is one implementation of ECMAScript standard. And after many iterations, it is now considered a mature language. All modern web browsers support JavaScript. You can use Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, or Opera. But I would suggest using Google Chrome. It was the first web browser to implement ECMAScript in its V8 engine, and other browsers are just following it. And many other browsers like Microsoft Edge and Opera are based on Google Chrome V8 engine. All web browsers provide debugging tools, and these are used to debug JavaScript code. Most importantly, they include a console window. The console can be used to log important debug information. You can also use it to execute or evaluate statements interactively. Before learning JavaScript, you should also have at least basic knowledge of HTML and CSS. HTML is just a markup language which defines the structure and content of a web page and have things like headings and paragraphs. HTML does not have any programming constructs. That capability is provided by the JavaScript to a web page. You can think of JavaScript as a complementary to HTML. So what can JavaScript do? JavaScript can generate web page content on the fly. It can detect the things like web browsers, operating systems, and devices so that you can present the right content to the user accordingly. It can also store some information in the cookies and can validate the data entered by users on client side before it is submitted to the server. You can also produce games and animations. All this makes the web pages more responsive and interactive for the end user. To write JavaScript code, you can use any text editor of your choice. You can use Notepad, Notepad++, Visual Studio Code, or Sublime Text. Or you can use any premium IDE if you are a professional developer. I have personally installed Visual Studio Code with live server extension, so it automatically refreshes the page in Google Chrome, and I do not have to load the page in web browser. The JavaScript code is embedded in HTML document using script element. In this example, only one line of JavaScript code is written between the starting and ending script tags. Type of the script is mentioned using type attribute. The type attribute is used to mention the language of the script. In this case, type is mentioned as text/JavaScript. You can also omit the type attribute. In this case, JavaScript is taken as the default script type. You can also write JavaScript code in separate JavaScript files and then include it in the HTML documents using src attribute of script tag. Here in this example, myjs.js file is included using src attribute. Traditionally, script tag of HTML is written in the head section of an HTML page, but nowadays it is very common to write it in the body section. If you write it in the body, just write it at the bottom of the body tag so that it executes after the document is loaded in the browser. One thing you need to remember is that JavaScript is case sensitive. All language keywords are in lowercase letters. However, HTML is not case sensitive. This can be confusing sometimes. Many client-side JavaScript objects and properties have the same names as the HTML tag and attributes they represent. What is an identifier? An identifier is simply a name. It can be a variable name, function name, label, or something else. In JavaScript, it can be a combination of digits, letters, dollar sign, or underscore. But there are two restrictions. The first restriction is that the first letter must not be a digit, and the second restriction is that the identifier cannot be a reserved word. In JavaScript, if you write more than two statements on the same line, these must be separated by a semicolon in between them. So writing a semicolon after each statement is optional. But in some situations, absence of a semicolon can misinterpret the code. So it is a common practice to write a semicolon at the end of each statement. It is always a good practice to write comment in the source code to document the code. These are ignored by the JavaScript interpreter. You can write C-style comments in JavaScript. To write a single line comment, simply place a double slash before the comment. You can also use the double slash to write an inline comment. An inline comment is written at the end of a line of code. You can also split the comment on multiple lines, but in this case, slash asterisk is written before the first line of comment and asterisk slash is written after the last line of comment. Now let us learn about variables. Variables are declared using let or var keyword. After writing the let or var keyword, name of the variable is written. In this example, my name variable is declared using let keyword. The let keyword is newly introduced in the language and is preferred way of declaring variables. Here, my salary variable is declared using var keyword. You can also declare more than one variables on the same line using a single let or var statement. In this case, names of the variables are separated by commas. You can also initialize the variables at the time of their declaration, but this is not necessary. You can initialize them anytime later. Equal to sign is used to assign a value to a variable. Variable scope determines the visibility of a variable inside a web page. A variable can be visible at block level, function level, or it can be visible globally. Global variables are accessible anywhere on a web page. Variables declared using let keyword are known as block level variables. It means these are visible only inside the block of code in which they are declared. A block of code is just a piece of code written inside a pair of curly braces. Here in this example, two variables x and y are declared and initialized inside a code block. Then there is last line of code which is outside the code block. This line tries to calculate sum of x and y variables, but this does not work because variables x and y are not available outside the block of code. But if you declare the variables x and y using var keyword inside the block, the last line of code works fine because variables declared with var keyword are function scope and these are available outside the code block. Here is another difference. With var keyword, you can declare a variable more than once. It is allowed but simply ignored. But let keyword does not allow redeclaration of variables. It simply throws an error. To make a variable global, just declare it outside any function. You can declare it with var or let keyword. So you will normally write the global variables at the top of JavaScript file. Here is an important point to remember. You can use a variable without declaring it. If you assign a value to a variable which is not declared using let or var keyword, JavaScript just makes it global. For example, I have assigned a value to my variable inside the calcsum function. JavaScript will not complain and will simply make it global, and its value will be accessible globally on the page. Global variables simply become properties of the window object in the browser, and these can be accessed using dot notation. It is a responsibility of the hosting environment to provide the global object. So in web browser, window object belongs to browser. Use of undeclared variables can become a problem. You can easily misspell a variable name and it will simply become a global variable. ECMAScript introduced use strict directive. Please note it is enclosed in a pair of double quotes, but you can also enclose it in single quotes. Many programming languages have the concept of constants. In JavaScript, a constant is declared using const keyword. After the const keyword, name of the constant is written and a value is assigned to it. Please note, you can only assign a value to a constant when it is declared. Scope of the constant is similar to variables declared with the let keyword. In simple words, constants are much like read-only variables in JavaScript. Please note that when an object is assigned to a constant, you can change properties of the object anywhere in your code. But reference of the object cannot be changed. Data type. ECMAScript defines 8 data types. First 7 are primitive types. These are number, string, Boolean, null, undefined, big int, and symbol. The primitive types are immutable value types. It means every time you modify the contents of a variable, a new variable is created internally and the old variable is destroyed and garbage collected. It makes programs slow. Object is a mutable reference type. It means an object variable holds a reference or address of the value, and value is stored somewhere else. In JavaScript, arrays, functions, regular expressions, and dates are all objects. In JavaScript, data types are implicit. It means you don't mention the data type when a variable is declared. The data type is implied from the value of the variable. You can easily change the data type of a variable to another data type by simply assigning a value of another data type to the variable. Variables are untyped or loosely typed. Here in this example, a variable x is declared and assigned a value 30. So the data type of the variable is number. On the next line, variable x is assigned a value true. So the data type of x is changed to Boolean. On the next line, variable x is assigned a string. The data type of x is changed to string. You can use the typeof operator to check the data type of a variable. The typeof operator is a unary operator that is placed before the variable name. Here in this example, typeof operator is used to print data type of a variable x on console. Undefined data type. When a variable is declared but no value is assigned to it, then its data type is undefined. So by default, undefined value is assigned to a variable. Boolean type variables have two possible values, true or false. Number data type is used to store numerical literals. These can be integers or floating point literals and can also hold negative numbers. Internally, it is stored as a 64-bit floating point number. There is a number object which has some useful constants defined. Min underscore value and max underscore value defines values range for a number variable. Min underscore safe underscore integer and max underscore safe underscore integer defines the range of integers for a number variable. So you can use these constants to check valid values for a number variable. When an error occurs as a result of some mathematical operation, JavaScript does not raise any error or exception. Rather, it returns a special value. These values can be infinity, negative infinity, or NaN. NaN stands for not a number. So you can check the result to make sure it is a valid value. Infinity value is set when there is an overflow. It happens in two scenarios. First is when the result exceeds the maximum value for a number. Second is when a positive number is divided by 0. Negative infinity is set when there is an underflow error. It also happens in two scenarios. The first is when the result is lower than the minimum allowed value for a number. The second is when a negative number is divided by 0. So these are the two situations when a negative infinity is set. NaN stands for not a number. When a 0 is divided by 0, NaN is returned. Here are two functions which can be used to check validity of values. Is finite returns true if the result is a valid number. It means it is not infinity, negative infinity, or NaN. Is_nan function is used to check whether the value is NaN or not. JavaScript includes operators for basic arithmetic operations. These operators are add, subtract, divide, and multiply. And there is a modulo operator which returns remainder of division. In addition, you can use functions exposed by the math object. The math object exposes a decent list of methods and constants for more complex operations. String data type. JavaScript string is a Unicode text. The string literals are enclosed within a pair of single quotes or double quotes. ECMAScript also supports multi-line strings, but in this case, a slash must be appended at the end of each line except the last line. Like other C-based languages, JavaScript also supports escape sequences. Escape characters are special characters which can appear in a string literal. These have special meaning. For example, /n is used to insert a line break in a string. Here is a complete list of escape sequences. You can use the plus operator to concatenate two strings. So the plus operator can be used to add numbers or concatenate strings. There are a number of methods which can be invoked on strings. Here is a comprehensive list. For example, you can search within strings, slice them, split them, and replace them. Remember, strings are immutable in JavaScript. Methods which modify the strings actually create new strings internally. So these can slow down things and should be used with caution. In addition, regular expressions can be used to search and replace within strings. Regular expressions are powerful and commonly used for text processing. Equality operators are used to compare results of two expressions. They return a Boolean value. These operators are equal to and not equal to. Double equal sign is used for the equal to operator. And exclamation sign and equal sign is used for not equal to. But unfortunately, these operators do not test the data type of the expression. For example, here I have compared string with a number. But the equality operator produced the true result. So another set of operators were introduced which also tests for the data types of the expressions. Now triple equal is the equal to operator and exclamation mark double equal is the not equal to operator. Relational operators like greater than equal, and less than equal are similar to other C-style languages. The in operator is used to check whether a property exists in an object or not. Object-oriented programming in JavaScript is different than other languages like C#, Java, or C++. There are no classes in JavaScript. Therefore, objects are not instances of classes. Object is a fundamental type in JavaScript. So what is an object in JavaScript? It is a composite value. It aggregates multiple values which are stored and retrieved by name. It is an unordered collection of properties which has a name and a value. So it is simply a name to value map, something similar to hash table or dictionary in other languages. Actually, it is an associative array. Its elements are accessed using property name instead of index of the element. You can create empty objects by assigning a pair of curly braces to a variable and then add properties or methods to it. Here, a variable person1 is declared by just assigning an empty pair of curly braces to it. Another way to create an empty object is using new object. After creating the empty object, we add properties and values to it. Here, I have added few properties and values in the person object. Note that the property names are written in double quotes inside the brackets instead of index of the array. You can iterate through all the properties of an object using for in loop. You can use for each loop to iterate through values. In other object-oriented languages like C# or Java, the dot operator is used to access properties. It is also available in JavaScript. For example, here I have accessed person.city and person.address using dot operator. But the dot operator will not work if the property names contain spaces or other invalid characters. Here in this example, first name and last name properties contain spaces in their name. Therefore, the dot operator will not work here. Here is another syntax for creating objects. This syntax is like object initializers in C#. Properties and their values are assigned at the time of declaration. After the assignment operator, properties and their values are written within a pair of curly braces. Note that property name and value is separated by a colon, and property to value pairs are separated by commas. You might have noticed names of first name and last name properties are enclosed in double quotes because they contain spaces in their names. Double quotes around property names are required only if these contain spaces or invalid characters. You can also delete an existing property with the delete operator. So you can add or delete any property at any time for an object. The objects can also be nested inside other objects. Here in this example, a vehicle object is created inside the person object. Note that the vehicle object is a property of person object. In JavaScript, functions are also objects, so you can assign functions to properties like we assign objects to properties. Here in this example, a function is assigned to getFullName property. The function concatenates last name and first name and returns it as a full name. The return statement is used to return a value from a function. If there is no return statement written, a function returns undefined. This operator is used to refer current object. It is used to access properties of the current object. Here in this example, getFullName method is accessed and invoked using dot operator. It is similar to accessing properties. The only difference is that a pair of braces is appended after the name of the property. If you omit the parenthesis, it will not execute the method. Rather, it will just return the function code. Here is another way to execute the method using array syntax. The method name along with the parenthesis is written as string. Please note, method property name must be a valid identifier. It means there must be no spaces or other invalid characters like other properties. We have already covered identifier naming rules. You can also write a function and then assign it to a property of one or more objects. So one function is shared among two objects to save the memory. This is useful when you are creating similar objects, but most probably you will create it in a shared base object, which we will see later. Here in this example, getFullName function is written once, and then it is assigned to getFullName properties of the person and person1 objects. So one function is shared by two objects. There are no classes in JavaScript. So instantiating similar objects from a class is not possible, but we can write a function which can construct objects. Such a function is called constructor function in JavaScript. It is a popular pattern among the JavaScript community. Don't confuse it with the constructor method of classes in other languages. It is just an ordinary function which accepts a number of parameters and creates an object. In JavaScript, we can create instances of functions using new operator. This is similar to creating instances from classes. So functions have dual role. They can act as simple functions or they can act as classes when invoked using new operator. And you can use instance of operator to check the type. You can use this operator to define properties of the new instance. But this is only true if you call the function using new operator. But if you call the function as normal function without the new operator, the meaning will be different. In this case, this keyword refers to the outer or parent object which holds the function and creates a property of it. In this case, outer function of my type function is global object or window object. So it will create a message property of the global object. So I can access the variable as normal variable. I hope you have understood the concept of this operator. Meaning, this keyword depends on how a function is called. Here is an example of constructor function. The person function accepts two parameters, first name and last name. Note that the first letter P of the person is capital. By convention, first letter of the constructor function is written as capital, whereas first letter of other function names, variables or any other names is always written in lowercase. Please note, this operator is used to define properties and assign parameter values to properties. Here, the function is instantiated by using the new operator and passing two parameter values. So, person1 and person2 objects are instantiated from the function. Please note the new operator, which is used before the person call. So, these function calls look like instantiating objects from a class. There are more than 11 built-in constructor functions in JavaScript. Constructor functions are available for all primitives and object types except null and undefined. Understanding these will greatly help you to understand JavaScript. But most often, you will use the literal or shorthand syntax for creating variables instead of using native constructor functions. But here is an important difference you should remember while using native constructor functions for primitive types. When you use it with new operator, the primitive type is wrapped as an object. But if you don't use the new operator, it returns the primitive type. That is a major difference when calling a primitive constructor with the value types. Here in this example, my number 1 is instantiated using new keyword. So it returns an object, whereas type of my number 2 is number. I hope this difference is clear. In other languages, a class can inherit from other classes, but in JavaScript, an object can inherit from another object. So the terminology is a bit different. The parent object or the object being inherited is called prototype object. Inheritance forms an object hierarchy. This object hierarchy is called prototype chain. So an object has access to all members up in the prototype chain. Each object has a proto property which can be used to set its prototype. This is double underscore proto double underscore. It returns a reference to the parent or prototype object. You can set this property anytime. So an object can have one parent at one time and another parent at other time. Here in this example, person proto object is written, which contains get full name method defined in it. And here, person1 object is defined with first name and last name properties. At this point, proto property of the person1 object defers to an empty object. And here, person1.proto is set to person_proto. So we have specified the proto or parent object of the person1 object. Here I have accessed getFullName method from person1 object. But most often you will not have to set proto property of an object like this. Most of the time you will create objects through constructor functions, and you can set it to the prototype property of the constructor function before creating objects from it. The prototype property must be set before instantiating objects from it. By default, the constructor function creates an empty prototype object, and it is set as proto of all the objects created from it. So it is a shared empty object. If we add methods and properties to it, these will be shared in all objects created by the constructor function. So here I have added getFullName method to constructor property of the constructor function, and it is added after instantiating a person1 and person2 objects. So you can add it before or after creating the objects. Result will be the same. If you see here, I have added the method via person1.proto property. So this is another way to access the shared prototype object. Each object also has a constructor property, which references to the constructor function from which it is created. Here, I have added the getFullName function via person1.constructor.prototype. You can also set attributes for properties of an object. There are three attributes: writable, configurable, enumerable, and value. You can set a Boolean value for these attributes. If you set the writable attribute to false, the property will become a read-only property. If you set the configurable attribute to false, the property will not be deleted with the delete operator. If you set the enumerable attribute to false, the property will not be discovered by a for-in loop. But setting attributes needs a special syntax. So you have to use methods of the object to define properties or objects. Here in this example, first name property is defined for the emp1 object. The first parameter of the define property method is the name of the object for which method is to be defined. The second parameter is in curly braces. And then there is definition of the property in curly braces, looks like an object. Note that value attribute is used to specify value of the property. You can use define properties method to define more than one properties in one statement. Here it is used to define first name and last name properties. You can use object.create method to define an object with a prototype and properties with attributes. It returns an object. Here in this example, emp1 object is created. The first parameter of the method is prototype. You can specify object.prototype to specify an empty prototype object, or it can be null, or you can specify name of your prototype object. As a second parameter, properties are defined like we did with define properties method. In addition to these, there are many other methods in the object which are very useful. For example, you can make the object sealed to inhibit the extension. In the new versions of JavaScript, they have provided classes, getters, and setter methods, and the syntax looks better. But this is just sugarcoating over the existing design of the language. And finally, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed the fast-paced learning experience. Please provide your feedback in the comments section. Also like the video and share it with your friends. Also subscribe the channel and press the bell button to receive notifications for my future videos. Goodbye.